Just got started again. Hopefully this is going to work this time. Let me know in the chat if you guys are able to see this at all. Alrighty. Hopefully this is going to work. I don't know why it froze, but unfortunately that is something that has been happening here. Yep, I see here that I'm getting live notifications. Okay, so we seem to be all right. If you guys are still here, go ahead and type away in the chat. I was in the middle of telling the story of Evindale for some of our new friends. Let's see what's going on. Wow. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Yeah, you have audio, but you're still missing that glorious visit. Tony, you may have to go to... hold on here. Let me just check out Evindale. Or let me check out the whatchamacallit. Let me go to the channel really quick. Go to the live feed. Yeah, no, we seem to be good. We seem to be back, Tony. You may have to go to... One second. Wow, I have to sign in. Hold on. Why is this doing this? This is so weird. Oh, okay. Refresh the channel. There we go. Let me see. Let me know if you guys are on board. If you are here. Now there's a buffer swirl. Okay. 1 second. Hold on, my friends. Hold on. Check out new stream on FB and YouTube. Here we go. Hey, we're back, Daniel. There we go. Okay, cool. So, Daniel, did you have to find... Thank you so much, Cap. Yay, we're getting people back. Oh, fantastic. Yay. So, yeah, I want to make sure that everyone comes back here. Hold on. I don't know why. It's something that's been happening with this. Thank you, Frank. Yay, Aaron. Hello. Yellow. Yeah, I want to make sure that everyone here is back, including Tristan, who was kind enough to not only sub on Twitch, also follow here and everywhere else. I don't know how many people are actually watching or anything like that anymore. Not kind of concentrating on that, but I have a feeling ISP stuff started kicking in, and then that was that. So yeah, let me know if the quality everywhere is okay. I'm kind of hoping it's going to work. All right, let's see. I see that thing's blue. All right. Oh, awesome. People are back. Okay, cool. Cool. Here we go. Is YouTube... YouTube seems to be working. Is YouTube working? I can't even tell.
Good evening. How can I help?
What? White Google, shut up. Alrighty. I think we're up. I can't tell. You know what? I don't even know. You guys let me know. All right, Cap. I see here that people are chiming in. All right, quality is good. Thank you, Sparkles. So, is our friend here? Quality is good. Awesome. Okay. YouTube seems all right. Daniel, awesome. Hopefully we can get our friend back. Right. So anyway, a continuation of the story. At least at least not frozen. Exactly. Right now I'm concentrating on the YouTube chat. I want to make sure that you guys are okay. I hope everyone in Facebook land is also okay. If it comes down to it, that I don't have the ability to multi-stream out to Facebook as well because of the issues. Let's see if anybody's watching over there. I may end up just streaming to YouTube instead. You know? I don't know. We'll have to see. You're on YouTube, yeah. I don't see too many people on Facebook. Yeah, there's one person currently watching, and I think that might be me. Okay. All right. So in the future, then I have a feeling I'm only going to be able to stream out to YouTube until that builds up and we get in a little bit more income. Then I'll be able to use Restream, but then put it out to Facebook. So, Frozen Steve was very sweet, though. You are very sweet. Your face is very sweet. Alrighty. So there was a continuation of this. As all of life continued to spread all around the planets, and I mean all the planets, life was unending. You see, the concept of endings, or the concept of concluding an idea, was never part of Scythia's expression of deity. Scythia was created merely as a force of life, a physical existence. And this included stone and rock and magma and all sorts of states of being, whether it be gas and solid and liquid and plasma and other things. This was a something that was never a concept in Scythia's realm, that death should ever be a thing. Just wait for the memes to come out from Rose and Steve. So, yeah. With life going on in perpetually, life itself began to have a problem. Of course, clothing was not really a thing, because what do you make clothing out of if you can't kill anything? If you try making something like this, then you would have to take down a plant and kill it. You would have to kill an animal for its skin. And so the creation of clothing was not a thing. Weapons did not exist, because in order to take a wooden haft of something, you would have to take down a tree. So one particular race of the elves, known as the Slin, or those that would later become known as the Slin, they were living in the mountainous areas. They were living above and below and other things like that. They eventually got kicked out by the dwarves. The dwarves occupied those realms and took over some of the secrets of the Slin. Those secrets were then carried by the Slin to their new home, Slindaril. And there is where they had developed something. They noticed that from the rock, if it was somehow, some way, if heat from lava and other things like that could be harnessed, and they started finding ways. They were originally very curious, and still are to this point. The Slin had discovered smelting. There was no death of anything. It was the underground heats from lava streams and other things just gave them everything that they needed. They didn't have a lot of tools, so they were using rocks to create a bloom of red-hot ore that had been smelted down. And then from there, they introduced carbon, which was found in other things. And all of that ended up turning into steel or iron. And so they created a weapon. And while they were doing that, other species were beginning to complain to Scythia, who all throughout this time had kept saying, "This is my plan. This is how it should be. It should be." And they were like, we're overpopulated. We can't do anything here. We can barely move around. And Scythia was like, "But this is my plan," and could not understand that there was a problem with creation, because that was beyond even Scythia's concept. This is beyond Scythia's thinking. And so we wound up with a wish for war and death. But those concepts never existed. And so imagine being blind and being told what a color looks like. You would have no frame of reference. You have no understanding of it. Imagine being deaf and being explained to what sound is. That never was there. And so to the eternal living, death was simply never even a thought. A great conclave, if you will, was called, and all representatives from all the living beings then came. And we're talking creatures both magical and not so magical at this point. Mainly it's just living people like you and me, halflings, a centaur, all manner of being came to complain to Scythia. And Scythia said, "Well, I don't know what it is that you want me to do," and got sick and tired of hearing it and closed off all communication, because Scythia was, in effect, just carrying out the dreams of the Tirsar and was pre-programmed. Like a robot, it only knows what it was programmed to understand. And so Scythia ended up saying, "Well, fine, if you want something to complain to, then I will create something." And Scythia, meanwhile, also beginning to realize that this is a soul being, and this is one of the curses of the living, is that we all seek companionship. And so Scythia also did that and created from one of the elves the great consort Evin, the namesake of Evindale. Evin came out as this being of divine energy, of infinite divine energy, having been composed of infinite divine energy, for only the infinite can create the infinite. And so the world itself was really just kind of +1. And that +1, the great consort, went and to go meet with all these people. And in so doing, the Slin representative now presented this thing as kind of a show and tell, not even understanding what it would do. It said, "What does this do? Here, Now, according to ancient Slynn lore, Avon touched the blade by going like this, not knowing what it was. According to the lore of the other elves, it was the Slynn who poked Evan with it. But whatever it was, Evan died. Evan's eternal life force, created by the divine Cythlia, spilled out of Evan, and blood containing the infinite divine energies of deity leaked out into the land, and for all others, washed over all of reality. And so divine magic came out, and in many cases, mutated beings, because now you have divine energy coupled with the will of mortal. Mortal had created a blade, fashioned something, but prior to this, the only active creation was that of deity, and yet mortal had now created something that deity had not. Mortal had become divine. And so when Aveen touched something not created by deity, but in still deity's creation impacted by the will of mortal, it died. And when it did, and all of its divine energy came out, and that great wash of energy came across the universe, or all of reality that Cythlia had created, that was no longer divine energy. It had now become something else, arcane energy, the power of the will to influence reality. And from there, as the blood then spilled into the land, primal energies then came about, and the earth itself now became alive. And from that, a portion of Cythlia then separated from her, or it, and became known as Nordaga. This, the very essence of the world. Volcanoes and mudslides, all of the destructive powers now contained in that force of nature known as Nordaga, but also the bountiful crop that would soon be raised, but yet life continued to exist forever, except Cythlia now felt that death was a part of this world and did not know what it was. It could not comprehend what death was. And so Cythlia itself appeared and found the great consort Evan laying on the ground, and wanted to know what had happened, and why it is that Evan now, with the eyes closed and unresponsive to touch. Cythlia, deity, now appearing before millions, billions even, could not comprehend what had happened. Then one raised its voice and said, "I did this, but it was not the wielder of the blade. No. It was something that even Cythlia had not created. A new god had appeared. One that was created while Cythlia was busy over the billions of years of creating the physical world. A new god had come about, one known as conclusions or endings. We call it death. And so this deity, now called Death, appeared before Cythlia and said, I was summoned here by the mortals. Why am I here? And Cythlia said, I don't know, but can you undo whatever it is? Says, no. The deed is done. There is no life here. Death has been granted to it. An ending, a plan, a conclusion of your plans. No one really understood anything about this. Cythlia couldn't comprehend and says, well, I want the powers of whatever it is that you can do. That which you have wrought upon my creation, I should have control over. This is my domain. And this other deity concludes and said, I don't know anything about your will or your plans. All I know is that I was summoned here, and I do not understand how you could be asking for my power. And this confusion caused a rift to appear in deity. And conclusions then split into two. Death was no more. Instead, the selfishness and the jealousy that Cythlia had was combined with the concept of death, and that became known as Phaon, a deity of endless murder and selfishness and greed. Meanwhile, the very spiritual nature of the force of nature, Nordaga, now embodied in life, or also having life within it, began to understand what death was, and a brand new plan had started. creatures were now able to die, and the constituent parts that they were comprised of would now be able to come back into the earth, and therefore a new possibility was then given breath. That became known as Feyer, and so Feyen, murderous death, and Feyer of natural death. Scythlia, a deity of life, could no longer exist in this world, and so off to a brand new world Scythlia would go, that which we now call the Isles of Avon, a land of eternal life and no death, and certainly no being that ever existed here would ever be able to exist there. Scythlia would now become a stranger in their own land, an exile in their own creation. And so the world then continued. But for all of those that had been perverted and transformed and morphed and mutated by that blast of divine energy, now tainted by the will of mortal, that which is now known as the arcane, anything that was mutated by this new arcane became known as the Atalti. Beings, trees, horses, anything. It all began to change, some of it absolutely horrifically, and millions of creatures died through this process of transformation because all of a sudden new possibilities began coming about. Arcane energy was able to replicate the divine in many instances, but not be wielded by the divine, but now instead by mortals. And mortals began to dream, just like the Tirsar had as well. And within their dreams, imagination came about. And with the expression of imagination, the arcane was able to therefore create. And so a horse all of a sudden was able to grow wings, or great horns would come out of its head. These unicorns and pegasi, that's what we would call them. The Evindalians didn't know what they were, and therefore hunted them down for their meat, because sustenance was now a thing. The divine cut off life from the living, because now they were doomed to die, according to the new plan of Nordaga. And thus a circle of life had started. Things began to flee the rule of the Atalti. Those that survived such horrific transformations became known as God Kings, and thus began the second age of Evindale, when the Atalti would now rule over all the worlds. Imagine, if you will, a horrific tree rising hundreds of feet tall, lording over anything below, and taking a look at all other trees as servants, imbuing them with life, and causing horrors unimagined upon those that are comprised of flesh. Meanwhile, other monsters began to come about. Lizards now began to grow wings, and imbued with the element of fire even began to breathe fire. Others began to breathe cold, and thus were born the dragons, or so legend goes. Others say that Scythlia had not finished with any of their dreams, with any of their creations. And so the ancient dragon themselves began to shy away. Now completed was their job. And the dragon now began to go elsewhere, and their essences were then embodied in other creatures, and a horrific period of transformation known as the Second Age of Evindale, the time of chaos and god kings, began to take over the world. But even the Atalti, as mighty and as powerful as they were, using these now eldritch magics within their blood to create impossible cities of impossible heights and impossible physics, even they began to die, because now the will of the individual existed, and where there's a will, there's a way. People would no longer stand for the oppression of the Atalti, and therefore rose up. The ride of the hunt then began in the western portions of a continent known as Erenal. There, in the country of that would later become known as Ivari, the ride of the hunt came and took down, over the course, a powerful force of thousands of them began to descend upon each of the Atalti, taking them down one by one, and tens of thousands died as the Atalti tried to defend against them, many of the Atalti now fleeing for their lives. Soon enough, the Atalti were gone, and the empire of the mortals would begin, and thus began the third age of Evindale. Civilizations now began to spread across all of the worlds, while magics themselves were beginning to become practiced and codified and standardized. Now magic users, themselves calling wizards and warlocks and witches and all sorts of other alliterative classes, all came about. Some of those that were descended from the Ataltes, from the ancient ones that used to wield magic natively, became known as sorcerers, while others began to find that magic existed within the land. The primal energies of Earth itself became known as the clerics or priests of Nordaga, that which we call druids. The races now began to stabilize, and evolution began to calm down. Science began to enter into it into the form of alchemy, and thus we come into the Fourth Age. By now, civilizations had begun to spread, and wars had already occurred towards the end of the Third Age. Calendars and trade routes were now created also during the Third Age, and much of that now solidified in the Fourth Age. And that is the map that you saw me creating, the Fourth Age of Evindale. But our story is not yet done, because even those civilizations would come to crumble. And thus the Fifth Age of Evindale comes about when all of those gods millions of years ago that were once no longer a part of this world or now a part of this world were summoned forth by Scythlia, who had taken all this time to try to exact their will upon the world once more. But it didn't quite exist. Not the way that Scythlia thought that it should. Because mortals by this time, in the Third Age, it was a time of high heroes, where they pushed all of those monsters back out to the periphery of civilization, and that is why in the Fourth Age you see more concentration on the civilizations and a more player-driven, if you will, story of adventure with politics and other things like that now coming to the fore. Cults now ruling and ruining things, while the monsters all existed out there in the periphery. But during the Fifth Age, some of those that had come to inherit the world, the adventurers, began to notice that something else was afoot. You may remember earlier on in the story, I talked about a deity that was, let's just say, the first iteration of physical reality. That deity, known as Dranathus, was still embodied somehow, some way in Scytlia's own realm. Others began to discover fragments of a prior reality, and that became known as the Calcifer Helix. Some of them began to gather together these things, and they realized that they had and held within their hands the very nature and blueprints of reality itself, the original blueprints even before Scythlia. Others also began to use it to try to rewrite history, to allow gods to come back. Short of the long, an interregnum, if you will, a war between the gods had occurred, and thus the Fifth Age of Evindale had begun with a calamitous, apocryphal apocalypse. Let's see how many other obscure words I could toss in there. And the world began to fall apart. These adventurers then came and saved the world, and Evindale kind of, in a way, held together. But all the worlds across all of reality began to crack and misform. Horrors began to come around. And some of the ancient gods, which never knew a physical reality under Scythlia, but instead had created one of their own, also came to bear, these eldritch horrors known as the Unspoken. And so the Fifth Age, we begin to see more eldritch horrors, and some of the cults beginning to disappear as the changes of the world went through. Science would eventually come to replace magic, and thus we enter into the Sixth Age and the Industrial Revolution, until finally there in the Seventh Age we begin to see a future where the ancient guilds now turned into companies, and those companies then became conglomerates. Those conglomerates then became governments, and those governments began to join into the syndicate. Religion by this point now completely gone. Science and greed now taking the fore. And all of the mortals that had created those things that would benefit them, corporations and guilds and what have you, all of that began to work against it as corporations began to gain an identity of themselves. And thus the syndicate was given immense power. Space was now a new frontier, and out into that, galaxies were now taken over, and 3 galaxies in this area of a supercluster within the universe were now taken over by the syndicate well into the Seventh Age, until finally it too began to run out of fuel. And that is where the Seventh Age game of Evindale, or now then known as Evindale, would now take place. And that is a story of survival and the reintroduction of religion into a world that wouldn't accept it. And so there you go. That's the history of Evindale over the past 40 years that's been developed. So no, it's not going to be counted as a really big rabbit hole. It's all about Evindale. If I start going down and start talking about evolution now or real world, that would be a rabbit hole. Besides, I was asked, so I don't want to hear it. Yes, I will drink water. Now that I've told the story, I will drink water. I promise you. So, guys, the history of Evindale, the audiobook. Spooky non-berry goblin mom reminded me to drink water. Yes, I will see it. I promise. Popcorn. Thank you, Tony. I really appreciate that. Okay, I just dropped the smiley faces Steve for future memes. Oh no! Oh no! What are you people doing? Well, anyway, guys, I'm going to let me see here. Let me see if the thingamahoozies is ready for tonight. I hope the new person was here to see that. Because this was really for them. I mean, I know I told that story several times, but nonetheless. Let me see. Hunters of the Hidden is up, but I want to make sure that tonight's video is up, so let me just check on its status. Couldn't run checks. What do you mean couldn't run checks? Hold on. Something happened with tonight's video. Oh, no. Oh, damn it. What the hell's going on here? It looks like that there might be a problem with the... okay. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. It looks like that there is a problem with the thing that's supposed to kick off in an hour and a half. Oh, no. Okay, I don't know what just happened, but it looks like that the stream disconnected or reconnected or something. I'm unsure what's going on, but anyway, this is part of this is the reason why the ISP is sending out a tech tomorrow. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to disconnect now, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I wish I could raid, but that's not something I can do. So it's a thing. I'm going. Hey Lou, what's up, man? So I'm going to disconnect. I'm going to make sure that tonight's 8 o'clock stream goes up, which is the Harbinger, the last of the Crossroads games that took place at 8:30 p.m. on Wednesday over on Twitch. If you like what it is that you see and you would like to see more content here on YouTube or on Facebook, go ahead and like and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, also click the bell so that you can receive notifications. And that is really going to help us know whether or not we should produce content on YouTube. There is going to be another YouTube channel, which is going to be the Atlas channel, if you will. That's going to contain the 10-minute introduction videos to each of the facets of the world of Evindale. But in the meantime, this live game channel is going to concentrate on the longer ones. And we're going to play the YouTube algorithm in hopes that that's going to work. Meanwhile, up on Facebook, that entire community, several hundred strong, we're going to be producing more content for that, some of which is going to be simulcast onto YouTube. And others hopefully will be able to dedicate some games and whatnot in the future for that. So guys, thank you so much for joining me. And I'm a Crossroads game. What's that all about? You tell us, Lou. You tell us. All right, guys. I'll tell you what. I'm going to end the stream now. I'm going to make sure that the 8:30 or that the 8 o'clock stream is going to go live.